if it wasn't for Farm Bureau stepping up and for policy and other things, we wouldn't be in the position we are today. You know, when farmers need help, any type of farmer, we rely on Farm Bureau.
Welcome to the Louisiana Farm Bureau Podcast. I'm obviously not Carl Wiggers. However, March is National Women's History Month, so we're letting the girls take over this one. And we're going to take this month to highlight some of the amazing women in agriculture across our state, and also just some of the great things that we have to offer for women in our state through the Louisiana Farm Bureau. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our first guest, Miss Michele Simoneaux.
Hello, I'm Michele Simoneaux. I'm from Assumption Parish, and I'm the state chair for Louisiana Farm Bureau Women's Leadership Committee. Awesome. And glad to be here.
Yeah, we're so glad in her beautiful home. We're so lucky to be here and on this beautiful day. So let's start for people who may not know who you are or what you do or who are your mom and them, as we were just joking about earlier. Tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, and how you got to where we are today.
I'm originally from Minden, Louisiana, so I'm a redneck import down to South Louisiana. Came to LSU, met my husband Rodney, and quickly was introduced to the rural life in Assumption Parish, which I knew nothing about. So we married in '85, been married 40 years this year, and jumped into YFNR, and he was the state chair in 1989. Oh. So from there, we did activities with YFNR, and then I was the parish chair, sat on the women's committee in Assumption Parish, parish chair, women's committee, moved on to district director. And then from there, I became secretary-treasurer for the executive committee, moved up to vice chair, and then to chair.
Awesome.
So
quite the resume,
an exciting
for
road.
Sure. You really jumped all in when you got introduced.
We did.
And you may be thinking, listening to that resume, that you obviously didn't have time for a lot of other things, but you also have quite the amount of kids and grandkids and are involved in a lot of other things. So tell us a little bit about your family dynamics and what life on the farm back here is like outside of the Farm Bureau involvement. So
we raised 4 children, Stephen, Sarah, Mary Claire, and Rebecca. They're all married now. Stephen is on the farm with us. We raise sugarcane, dabbled in soybeans a little back when the price was really up, but we're strictly sugarcane. And then our claim to fame is 2 Farm Bureau queens, State Farm Bureau queens, Mary Claire and Rebecca, in 2010 and 12. And they, all together, I have 9 grandchildren and 1 on the way. So keeps us busy. As if you were not busy enough with all the other things. Okay, so let's kind of go back. We talked a little bit about how you got involved in Farm Bureau, but let's maybe talk about the first time that you remember ever hearing about Farm Bureau, or what that was like, what your introduction was like into that. Obviously, it was through Mr. Rodney, but do you remember your first event? I didn't know a thing, and we go to a meeting, and they're like, "You're going to have to participate in 4-H, cookeries and la la." I'm like, "What am I have to do?" And as long as I don't have to cook, because they said my cooking was not that good coming from North Louisiana. Because you just made us lunch, and it was pretty good. Well, thank you, but they were wrong. Yeah, I learned to cook along the way as well, but so we jumped right in, and whatever his duty was my duty. And I also went to work for back in the day it was Production Credit Association, and now we're First South Farm Credit. So I've been there 40 years, and it's a lending company for ag. And so between the farm and work and the kids, we just jumped right in. You really and there was no other lifestyle. That was it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your job with First South Farm Credit? Because those kind of overlap with Farm Bureau. I feel like we run into you in the professional setting and volunteer setting. We are an ag lender. We make crop loans, cattle loans, equipment loans, and real estate loans just for hunting properties and stuff. So I'm a branch operations coordinator for Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. So been there 40 years, and I love my job, love the people I work with. We get to associate with Farm Bureau. We sponsor a lot of events for Farm Bureau and other ag events as well. Awesome. So it's fun. You really, again, we just jumped all in. We're just laughing that you would never know that you didn't grow up in this lifestyle. But let's talk a little bit about what it was like raising all of your kids in this lifestyle, especially from somebody who didn't grow up in that, and what value you think that has. Well, they learned when their dad pop a call, they had to go to work. So if Papa called and the workers didn't show up, they had to go to work. I will say I have never driven a tractor, don't intend to drive a tractor, but my kids did. So Stephen is on the farm, and he worked throughout college, all the time. And then the girls, if somebody didn't show up, if they were in their cheerleader uniform or whatever, they would drive a tractor. Yeah, I don't know if they ever really drove the combine. Rebecca probably wanted to, but I'm not sure. So,
That tracks.
But when duty calls, you have to do what you got to do.
I think that's an awesome thing, though, especially for Women's History Month and kind of what we're talking about, just women in ag. I think that's an important thing. Like, women in ag doesn't always look like what we think it looks like, and it doesn't have to be you're a full-time farmer, and it doesn't have to be, you can still be involved in the lifestyle and not look necessarily the stereotypical part and still have a pretty good role in it. And I think your kids are all really good examples of that.
Yeah,
too.
and I mean, I think it taught them responsibility, loyalty, just a good work ethic. And a lot of employers will tell you, if they see a resume with any kind of farming industry on it, those usually turn out to be great employees.
I believe that for sure. Okay, let's kind of go back to Farm Bureau a little bit now that we've kind of touched about the general ag. You are our Women's Leadership State Chair, so can you talk about what the Women's Leadership Committee is and what y'all do? Just kind of give, for somebody who's maybe never heard of that, just give us a little overview of what that is.
So the mission for the Women's Leadership Committee is to provide leadership for women of all ages and to run ag across the state, in the community, nationally. We want the women to be able to tell the story, because of course I think women tell the story better than men.
I obviously think so too.
Anyway, so that is our goal, and it starts in a parish, and there's a women's committee, and we will help any women's committee, any women in that parish. There's a boot camp in Washington, D.C., American Farm Bureau puts on, but we just want to give every woman an opportunity, to tell their story, and all over, to the consumers.
That's awesome, and we appreciate that. Some of the work we do in our department, and we know that y'all are great echoes of that, and it's so important because we were joking with Mr. Rodney before. He's like, I'll get on camera, but the women are a little more apt to get on camera to spread the word and tell about what they do. That sometimes, and especially as somebody who's not grown up in it, we take for granted that everybody knows what we do and understands what we do, and that's not necessarily.
I think people do take that for granted these days, but with all the social media, it's really important to tell your story, because people comment on social media, and it's not always true. They'll talk about the labels and the organic and this and that. But if we don't tell the real story, it just doesn't get told.
We kind of joke sometimes at Farm Bureau that they kind of ask us to, we ask people to marry them before we even ask to date. And it sounds like that was kind of the case with you and Mr. Rodney. When you married him, it sounds like you married into Farm Bureau. So how, from the time that you were kind of thrown into Farm Bureau and being involved in that to now when you're sitting on the state board as Women's Leadership Chair and dedicating a lot of your time, because that's the reality is this is a volunteer organization and everybody is volunteering their time. And as we've talked about, you've got a full-time job, you're helping on the farm, and you've got a plethora of grandkids that you're also helping with a lot that I know. So why do you do it, and what have you seen? What have you gained from the organization from the time that you were thrown in till now, and why do you continue to dedicate time to it?
I think most of all I've gained my leadership skills, definitely from Farm Bureau, so I would attribute that. But the main thing I think I've really seen is what Farm Bureau can do for you. We've had the drought, we've had the crawfish. If it wasn't for Farm Bureau stepping up and for policy and other things, we wouldn't be in the position we are today. When farmers need help, any type of farmer, we rely on Farm Bureau. So that's what I want people to see, what Farm Bureau can really do for you personally as far as leadership growth, but also for your farm policy, because it's from your state level all the way up to national. And they provide a lot of assistance.
Yeah, for sure.
For our family and farms.
We kind of joke sometimes, there's a joke that everybody benefits from Farm Bureau, even if you're not a member, if you're an ag, you benefit from Farm Bureau. But the reality is it does take people volunteering their time to make Farm Bureau happen and to be a reality, and for those effects to go into change and to have people at the Capitol lobbying for those changes and things like that. So I think it's really important. What would you tell your neighbor if somewhere here in Belrose were asking about Farm Bureau and I just don't really have time to go to that parish meeting, or I don't think there's anything in it for me, they don't need me? What would you tell them?
Well, other than the policy benefits that help keep our rural communities going, there's benefits for rental cars, hotels, car seats, hearing aids. The list goes on and on. And so I tell people that work at the feed store, you need 3 car seats, you can get them for cheap. Join Farm Bureau and become a member, So that's another thing I would tell them. But I've made friends, from north to south, east to west in the country, through Farm Bureau. And they're just almost like my family now, not other than just being friends. So
kind of goes to that. Do you think I think a lot of people involved in agriculture and within Farm Bureau have the same values, and it's great to connect with people across the country and across the state that have similar interests and similar values. Can you kind of talk about how you've made friendships through this and just what that's looked like?
I mean, there's friendships from the Caladium friends in Florida to my hog friends in North Carolina. But we all share the same values. It's all about farming. It's all about community. It's all about faith. It's all about family. And we just really have the same values when it comes down to it, the farming community. So we want to invite everybody in and tell our story.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about what the committee's mission is. Let's talk about some of the things that y'all do. Y'all obviously have Fusion coming up next week, I hear. We have a leadership conference coming up. So kind of just give us a view of some of the activities that are coming up and then some of what y'all have already done throughout the year, just for if somebody's like, oh, this sounds right for me, about what those opportunities are if they get involved.
So Fusion is American Farm Bureau Conference. It involves women in ag in the classroom, and YF&R. So it brings all of us together to try to work together, do the same projects, communicate. So that's in Denver. And I think we have close to 30 going total.
Awesome.
So should be a good crowd and a good conference for that. The women also put on a women's leadership conference every spring. This year will be held in conjunction with the Mike Dana Leadership Conference. So we'll have a board member presidents meeting in the morning, and then we'll have lunch and do some tours out in the Ponchatoula area. We're visiting a dairy, a tea farm. We're going to Covey Rise. So it should be, and then speakers on Saturday morning. So everyone's invited, young, old. So we're hoping to have a good conference out in Ponchatoula. We also contribute to Ronald McDonald houses throughout the year. It's also an American Farm Bureau project. But in the past, we've been able to visit our Ronald McDonald's. So since COVID, we really haven't been back in, but we donate food items. Sometimes you can go in and cook, that we're hoping to do this spring, but it just depends on the house. And then we contribute to the veterans homes. So every fall, there's veterans homes throughout the state, and we will make monetary contributions, toiletries, coffee, bingo, play bingo. It's just different varieties for which house we're going to go to the veterans.
Yeah, that's awesome. They are doing a good job of definitely reaching out into different groups and making sure that missions gets out of that echo chamber and are spreading the word about what y'all do and providing.
And we're fixing to have a meeting out in Lake Charles, and for our next meeting, and it's during Ag Week on the 19th. So we'll be reading the new Ag book to a school out there in that area.
Oh, that's fun. I didn't know you were doing. That's awesome. That's really
just
fun.
Got on the calendar.
That's awesome. Look, I haven't even seen that update. It's a live update here for the podcast viewers, exclusive. Let's talk about if somebody is watching this and they just heard what you described and like, that's something I'm super interested in. What can they do to get involved? What's the next step if they're like, I want to be involved in the Women's Leadership Committee and tell the story of ag just like them?
Well, they can contact me. They can contact any of our committee members, but they can contact their local Farm Bureau office. There's a parish president, there's secretaries there, and a women's chair, and just say, what can I do to get involved? A lot of women's committees. We're having Ag Day in Assumption Parish in about 2 weeks. And all of our committee, not all, but most of our committee members will, participate, work our Farm Bureau booth, and then we help 4-H and FFA. We do some community projects together with them. So every parish has different levels of what they contribute to. So it really goes back to your parish level, and then you can move up onto the state committee.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to link all of those parish offices and contacts. So if anybody is interested, they can easily find that here. I kind of want to transition a little bit back into just, we kind of started this with, it's National Women's History Month. That's a big thing in ag because women are not the majority there and sometimes they're seen lesser than. What do you think it means to be a woman in the ag industry these days? Or what does that mean to you?
I mean, I think it's gotten a lot more prevalent than it was, when we first started, because there really were no women and there were no women telling their stories. So along with all the opportunities we've got, for media and everything, we are able to tell our stories. And there's a lot more women in ag, there's few that even run their own farms, and I think it's a great opportunity for women, and I hope everybody steps up and takes that opportunity.
Is there anything else that we haven't touched on today or that you want to talk more about?
No, I just want to take the opportunity to invite any and all women, whether you're in ag, whether you work at the feed store, whether you work at the sugar mill, there's a lot of people connected to ag, in the chemical industry, fertilizer, whatever, just to take the opportunity, ask somebody, get invited to, women's committee meeting in your parish and start there.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to sit with us. And all the things we mentioned, we'll be sure to link under in our podcast description. But thanks so much for visiting with us, Miss Michele.
Well, thank you. And thank you for coming out to Belrose.
Of course, it's beautiful. This is just the beginning of our series for Women's History Month. So be sure, if you want to hear more about the women in ag or the opportunities available for women in ag this month, to tune in next week where I will be here with you again instead of Carl Wiggers. So if you're waiting for him, I'm very sorry. It's me for a couple more weeks. So thanks for joining us for this episode of the Louisiana Farm Bureau Podcast.